hired Alan Green-Williamson to come in and, do accounting work, assist in getting your audit completed, provide the documentation that your auditors needed for the, 2024 school year. And that report was due to be filed with the legislative auditor by December 31st, 2024. So we came in to initially have meetings with staff, Mr. Lovett, who was there at the time, brought about the financial crisis that you're facing today. And we're going to present each of those 5 areas and tell you a little bit about them. And then we have a 6th area that is just kind of some trends that we identified that we want to be sure you're informed about. So I'm going to start with the bank statement and the cash flows. Immediately, we took the top bank statements, which were the payroll fund and the master bank fund, which are, of course, your biggest transaction funds and cover most of your activity. The master bank, of course, includes a lot of funds. It includes general fund, along with a number of grants, sales tax, etc. in that fund. Well, sales tax is separate, and school lunch is also a separate account. But we started work on those, and we are currently in April of 2025. We have those reconciled from July 1, 2024 through April of 2025. And then we were able to obtain the May bank statements for those 2 accounts from Ms. Bridgewater earlier this week when we were over. So we've begun the process with the May bank statements. I just kind of wanted to tell you some balances that are on the May bank statement for these major funds. This is at the end of May. And also, I want to point out that these are bank statement balances. They are not reconcile balances, okay? The master bank, $179,890. The payroll bank account, $454,708. Now, I don't want to mislead you with that number because there are some payroll liabilities that do come out of that. Approximately, based on our conversation this afternoon, about $200,000. So, then the child nutrition account was $1,343,171. The sales tax maintenance bank account was $128,872. The sales tax salaries fund was $35,954. The total sales tax fund was $1,752.71. The capital outlay project fund was $9,983.57. 4 certificates of deposit for a total for all 4 of $632,921. And then the workers' compensation account, $50,385. Again, that's your May bank statements that we've recently received and are working on reconciling. Another issue that would be, address your cash flow issue. Of course, getting these bank statements reconciled was a big part of that. But we also found out at that time that there had been a lot of transfers made throughout the year 24-25. Now, we have not looked back at the prior year, but from what we know from 24-25, there were a lot of large transfers made from some other funds. So effectively, the master bank account coupled with these other funds that I'm about to outline to you are the ones that are paying transfers, ultimately ending up in payroll to cover the payroll expenses for the month. So the first thing that we noted was transfers from child nutrition programs. We had a transfer in August of 2024 for $250,000. We had a transfer in September 2024 of $250,000. We had a transfer in October of 2024 for $375,000, for a total coming out of there of $875,000. That funding has not been reimbursed to school lunch at this time. The next one that I would point out to you is the school board withdrew amounts from the workers' comp fund. In January 2025, $540,000. In March of 2025, $100,000, for a total amount out of that fund, also which is not being reimbursed currently, of $640,000. The school board also temporarily withdrew from the sales tax restricted account $400,000 in April 2025, but it was repaid pretty much immediately, so there's a zero balance there due to that fund. Then another $500,000 was withdrawn from the child nutrition program in May of 2025, and that has also been put back. Now, there were some other transfers in May, but as we're working on the May bank statement, we haven't nailed all those down yet, but in our next report, we'll explain that to you. But currently, we have $1,515,000 that's been effectively taken from other funds to support, either it went directly into general fund to make the transfer to payroll, and then sometimes we found that it went directly to payroll. So that's number one of the issues that we think is affecting your, or bringing about your financial crisis that you're at. Now, Christy's gonna, okay. I'm gonna jump to number 3 now and talk to you a little bit. We also found stipend payments that had been made to employees. The school board paid a total of $894,533 in stipends for the 24-25 year as of May 24, 2025 for 260 employees. Of that amount, $812,651 was for wage earning codes 25 and 26, which in your payroll system, that just says stipends, okay? The other was Fund 40, which is extra time, which we have taken it out of that 894 just to reflect the 812,000. So you can really see a true picture of that. Of those stipends that were paid, there were 37 employees that received more than $6,000 in stipends during the 11 months of the current fiscal year, and there were 14 employees that received more than $10,000 in stipends for the 24-25 year. You can see there's a chart below there that begins with the year 2019-20, ends with the year 24-25. And you can see the comparison of 1920 was $82,219, which in the last 3 years has been in excess of $800,000 each year. And I would note that these stipends are not from COVID funds. There's a very small portion that is, but they're spread out throughout the different funding sources. And we talked with Dr. Butler, and we're going to provide him the details on that next time we're together, so we can kind of look at some particular numbers for grants. But then also, in addition to those stipends, there were ESSER stipends paid 3 of these years, which you'll see under that column. The first year, $425,250, then $438,499. And then this past year of $907,100.
Can you break down what are some of the stipends?
Okay, the ones under the ESSER stipends, just from memory, the $425,250, I think was 1,000 or 1,500 and 2,000 or 2,500, depending on the degree of employee, like teaching staff or support. The same thing with that second one in 22-23, and then that last one, it was either $3,000 or $4,000 basically. There were a few deviations, but mostly that was the amount that was given.
So that was the COVID stipend that we gave everybody $1,500, and then another $1,500, and then a $4,000 that we just received.
Right, that's right. It was coded in under your earning codes in the payroll payroll system as COVID retainer. But when you went over to the general ledger, it was called COVID stipends, but it's the same thing, so.
Well, on May 23rd board meeting, I admitted, the stipends that were board approved, I never had a problem with it. It's a stipend that was not board approved. And speak to the employee, we approved them stipends. There's stipends in this area that were, any stipend approved by the board, there's no problem, no law, nowhere. It's a stipend that any type of monetary money, from salary to stipend, the only stipend we approve is that the administrative stipend when they get at the beginning of the year, and we approve board stipend for athletic that I abstained against. My problem is when we look at these stipends, I'm looking at the stipend that was not board approved.
At this point, and we got the minutes this week, and
Okay.
for a number of reasons, there's things we have to get to the auditor, et cetera, but we'll be able to look and see, those details. Currently, I can't answer that question for you because I'm not sure what went through the board and what did not. But, we can look at that, down the road.
Yes, sir.
And then I think Christy's gonna come up and she's gonna discuss with you the grant reimbursement and status update. But, and one of the things that you, mentioned about the COVID stipends, I think she's gonna explain to you a little bit from the ESSER, background about the details of how that happened or the history with that and what actually took place there, so.
Good evening. If you look at the very back of your little packet, there's a spreadsheet that looks like this. It's 2 pages, and that's what I'll be talking from. The first thing that I want to talk about is we feel like we have found part of the reason that the financial situation has gotten to this point, and a large part of that was ESSER funds that were spent and not requested. If you look on the second page of the spreadsheet, the last 3 funds on there, ESSER 3 formula, ESSER 3 incentive, and homeless, ARP, homeless heart. Those 3 ESSER funds ended September 30th. And the amount that you see in the far right column is $621,272, $237,076, and $14,807 were amounts spent through those ESSER funds that were never requested. So your stipends that were paid out of ESSER, your COVID stipend that was paid, those funds you did receive back. You've gotten the reimbursement back for that. But these are funds that were paid that were not requested and you did not receive, which means your general fund is basically eating those costs at this point. In ESSER 3, it was mainly technology and regular supplies, $502,000. Of that, $419,000 was for hardware technology and it was for Chromebooks. And that was spent on September 30th and was never reimbursed. And then you also had $110,000 of contract services that was never reimbursed. These funds had a hard deadline of December 16th, and those funds are closed. Mr. Tim has verified that with Louisiana Department of Education that they don't even have access to those funds anymore. So those funds at this point are completely falling on your general fund. Now, I'm going to try to work with some of the supervisors that have other funds to see if any of these costs would fall under what their grant purpose is for, to see if we may can pick up some of that. But there are no grant dollars out there that will come close to this amount of money. bottom, number 115, direct student services, that $47,100. That grant also ended September 30th, and I verified that personally with the Department of Education. These expenses were made after that, so these expenses will have to be either moved to the general fund, or, I'm hoping maybe we can move those for sure to another grant, because they're for contract services that I feel like will be eligible for some of your other grant funding. So if you look at the very back page, you have a little over 6 million, 6.6 million in grant expenditures. Now, when we say grant expenditures, 99% of your grants, you have to spend the money up front and then request it. You cannot hold federal dollars, in your account and then pay. So all of this means your cash flow has to be good enough for you to spend those dollars and then request the funds back. We have currently, including what I've requested this week, have requested back 5.1 million. That leaves us 1.46 million left. Of that, 990,000 will encompass those funds that are either ESSER funds or other funds that right now we don't have a place to take them from. We do have 274,000 that can be requested. Ms. Tilly is actually working on one of those for 140,000, the 21st Century Grant, which requires an extraordinary amount of documentation to go with it, so that's not one that can just be requested quickly. She's working on that, and a little bit of bright is, this week I was able to request 529,000. Two of that, about 52,000 has already been approved and will be coming back to you. What I've done is take every grant that you found, and I worked it from July 1 to current, and verified that every single expenditure in it has been paid, and has been paid according to the budget. When you see the column in the middle on your right that says in question, that $197,000, that's funds spent in your grant funds that don't fall within the grant budget as written. That doesn't mean you won't get those funds, but it does mean that we're going to have to do a budget revision to try to put the money in the places that the money is spent. And that's something I'm going to be working next week with the supervisors, so that we can try to get that submitted next week, so it can be approved, so we can get those funds along with your June funds by the July 15th deadline that we have for all funds for this year. I also when I went through the whole year, I found things that were not requested, and those have been caught up and are being were requested or are being requested. So anything that was missed, whether it was $100 or $100,000, those funds are being requested or are in the column that we need to move the budget so that we can request those. So right now we have 274,500 that we can request, that we're working on. We have another 197 that I feel sure you can get if we can get the correct budget amendments done. And then you have 990,000 that out of that, I'm hoping we may can move 50 to 75 to other funds, but I can't guarantee that at this point. So you're looking at needing in your general fund at least 900,000, which when you look at that type of fund that you spend out of grant funds and you're not getting compared to what we've had to borrow for payroll, that puts you close to $1 million right there out of the 1.5 million that you borrowed from other funds. I'll also be working in the next few weeks with the processes on the grant funds so that we can make certain that this type of thing doesn't happen in the future, and we have a good process that we spend within the budget, the items that are in the budget, and we get those requested. Any questions on the grants? Any questions from the public? Anyone?
Has there, one question reimbursements, because this is an easy thing to fix. Has there been an excuse or a reason why we didn't get the reimbursements? I mean, has anyone offered up why a reimbursement didn't get sent in?
I'm not sure exactly what the process was when the former business manager was here. I know in my district as business manager, it fell on me to make certain that everything, every month was in the right areas and that it was requested. Whoever was over requesting would request them. So ultimately, it fell on my back to make certain that was done. Again, I don't know what the procedure was here in the fall when the bulk of that wasn't requested.
In the fall?
Correct. The bulk of it was, on that grant that ended September 30th, those grants that ended September 30th that were not
The
requested.
funding, the
Right.
possibility of getting back is December 25.
December 24, December of 24. If it says 25, I put that wrong.
It says funds ended 12/25.
Put 24.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry about that. 24. And that was a hard deadline from the federal government to the state on those extra
Right.
funds.
And it wasn't a sneak up on anything that day that they published,
No, that they had been published.
well in advance.
Right, we actually knew when we got when ESSER funds were distributed, the end
Yes, ma'am.
dates were given, and they actually, LDOE gave a small extension approved by the federal government, from the September 30th. Normally, if you end in September 30th, you have 2 weeks to request your funds, and they did give that extra through December 16th to allow districts, that were trying to complete projects and things, to utilize those funds. We do as soon as they were issued, yes. When ESSER funds were first given, there was all kinds of documentation that came down the pipe from LDOE with them. And, every one of them, there were 3 different pots of money that came. They're considered ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. And they all started at different times and they all ended at different times. But when we were given the funds, we knew exactly what year range, how many years those went for, what the deadline would be on those funds.
We did, Bud and most of the board know, we did ask about why we were applying for our reimbursement. I told business manager, this board was sitting right here. I said, you have 60 days before to apply for your reimbursement. And this board sat right here and heard me. He told me we had no problem with our reimbursement. And all I'm hearing from you all is about reimbursement. And this almost a year ago, when we first did our audit report with him, 2023, 24, he stood right in front of me. Because I request, I say, the auditor saying on this paper that I have and what you have, I say, have we requested $3 million of reimbursement? Oh, hey, that. And then I come up and find out all these reimbursements behind. And Dr. Butler, we all was sitting right here when he said that. Because I was saying, who don't apply for the reimbursement? Who don't? And what I'm hearing from you all is that we got a problem more with reimbursement, and we haven't hit the 22, 23, 24, 25 of West Bend. But this boy said right here and heard me ask him it. He said right there and told us, oh, we applying for our reimbursement. And all we hearing now, it comes out, the truth will come out, is that these reimbursements, and I'm listening to y'all saying what you eat about general fund. We done struggled the last 6 months, even to make payroll. Longer than that. And we asked our business manager, and I asked, it's on tape, I'm gonna make sure I pull every tape it up as it goes deeper. I asked him, I say, if we got a problem, let Dr. Butler know and report to us, and we can try to amend the budget to fix where we at. He kept telling us we was doing good. And this boy sitting here and they know he did. Because I had. But when you're dealing with money and 250 employees, we barely made it this last pay period. If you got 200 and some employees, I got to tell them on the 25th that I can't pay them. You hearing all the rugged now, let them don't get paid. And this for the whole summer. I think the whole summer budget, and I hope and pray we fix it. The whole summer budget is about $2 million for an employee. So he should have told us the truth, but he's gone, and we're dealing with it. And I don't like it.
I'll kind of cover, as I mentioned when I started, that I cover one part of this, and Debbie and Christie's kind of covered part of it. I cover the payroll through May. So as a result, you really that there's $200,000 that needs to come from one of these other funds to finish enough money putting in the payroll fund to be able to pay all the bills related to May's payroll. So in effect, for mental purposes, you should just think that there is no balance in the payroll fund, and there's $200,000 more that we got to put in the payroll fund for all those outstanding teacher retirement, group health benefits, et cetera, et cetera. I just mentioned that. If you would flip over, I think they kind of covered through page 3. If you flip over to page 4. This is talking about staffing. This chart sort of at the top of the page kind of shows you the number of personnel that the school board had back in these various dates. We started in June of 19 and June of 20. I guess these are really kind of pre-COVID days that we had about 200 employees at that time, and I kind of took and just averaged for the first 3 years as shown here through June of 2021. That on average you had about 200. So that eats up a good bit. But if you multiply that out, if you use the 60 support staff and about 11 teachers, that comes out to $2.5 million that you're spending on salaries and benefits for that increase in staffing. A lot of that was paid by ESSER and by COVID money, and those are kind of getting back on track since we don't have COVID money anymore. Those personnel, unless you can move them into some of the other federal programs, you're going to have to really reduce staffing a good bit. Dr. Butler and Ms. Bridgewater and my staff kind of talked about that this afternoon, and he has some thoughts on that. And those that are paid strictly from federal programs, and then also as far as looking at it, their staffing and other programs that there needs to be a review of that to make sure our staffing aligns with the number of students that we have kind of going forward. So staffing is going to be key, I think, to your success and trying to get us out of the financial situation that we're in and so forth.
And again, to add to that, the COVID money ended in September.
Correct.
So we carried all the COVID employees, knowing it ended in September, for the rest of the year. Of this last school year.
Correct.
Knowing
So some of it
it
got
was
moved.
over.
Some of it got moved to federal programs, but some of it.
Federal program is big enough. It's not big enough.
It's not big enough now to pick up 70 people, so I understand. Item number 5 is just the Department of Education letter that you received in regards to, this goes all the way back to the 2021 fiscal year. They're questioning some costs that you've submitted, and you have to provide better documentation or providing documentation on that. I would mention to you that I went to lunch with the superintendent of another school system, and I think the Department of Education is going through and examining and auditing the expenditures for COVID money, starting with the 2021 year, and I assume since this other school board is also going through the same type audit process that, they're doing this statewide or whatever, so, I think it's gonna turn out to be whether, how good a job that the Madison School Board did as far as documentation and submitting of that, and then this submission that they're wanting now as to how that comes out. I would probably think the bottom line is you're gonna probably wind up with some, expenditures that there won't be proper documentation, and there may be some payback for that to the state, but hopefully that, if it is, it'll be a minor amounts and so forth on it. Kind of moving to page, any questions on that so far? Kind of moving to page, 5, as far as just some other troubling things that I've kind of mentioned this before, but it's worth repeating or whatever. The COVID mega jackpot payout era is kind of over. It's over for all governments, all local, state governments, and et cetera. And we're having to go back to the other day, the older days where we always worried about we didn't have enough money to do things that we'd like to do and so forth on it. Your MFP funding, because there was a drop in student count this year, this is item 6C. Skipping over a couple of these, but picking up the important ones, or the most important ones. Your MFP funding dropped. That it started out the year based upon what you thought your student count would be. They took the October count and then they wound up getting adjusted.
Did that mean people just leave the district, or was it, clerical of making sure butts and seats was the number that we turned in, or?
Dr. Butler probably a better one to address that. Student count.
Yeah, we don't know exactly, I wasn't here at the time, but I don't think it was because of a clerical error. We did have quite a few students to leave and go other places, and a few that came back, different, grade bands.
Jim, I'm going to ask you a question. When the last 6 months, and when you all said the money that we had been using, can you think, do y'all have the documentation of how much money we paid back and when people came in these last 5 or 6 months or longer? Because when we were taking our money, and I'll let you get to that last page, but I wanted to ask you about this CD. And when you get there, but make sure you be able to get that for us so we can see it ourselves.
We'll see what we can do for the next board meeting on that. Okay, we kind of mentioned, Christie mentioned a while ago that we had really $1 million worth of expenditures on ESSER that's not going to be reimbursed, that requisitions were not filed on it, and as she mentioned, she hopes to move 50,000 or so of that maybe over to another federal program and get reimbursed for it. But basically, when you get to your cash flow and you have $1 million hit on requisition expenditures that you're incurring that are not reimbursed, the general fund is really the one that's got to pick that up. Additional expense that was painful, I would say, for the school board is that item number D on 6D, where you spent $250,000 on the planned new career technical building, and before stopping construction, I guess, and I guess there wasn't enough time to get the building finished to be able to qualify for it, but that was money that came out of the general fund as well. So both of those added together probably really contribute to most of that $1.5 million that Debbie talked about, that has to be, as you kind of rock from Peter to pay Paul on, and to help fund the payroll checks and so forth. Just for traditional cash flow cycle on item E, just for your information, you collect a big amount for everyone taxes in December, January, February, March, and then you use that throughout the year, calendar year, to help fund operations. And so your cash flow continuously goes down throughout the year. As you know, throughout a calendar year, not your fiscal year, because you go from July to June, but as far as the calendar year, it'll decline throughout the year. And as you know, severe cash flow problems at this point, and this is it's going to get worse before it gets rest of the year, and you probably used up a good bit of that to help on this payroll and so forth on it, so.
Can you explain to the public, Avalon tax, where do it come from?
Yes, the Avalon taxes, property taxes would be a common, is a common name used for that, but it's just the property taxes that are paid annually, that bills go out in November, and people pay them to the sheriff, and the sheriff pays them, distributes it to the taxing bodies, but it's just, property taxes on your homes, on your businesses, and, et cetera, that is paid in, and it comes in sort of bulk, and it comes in within a month, 2 or 3 month period, and then again, it goes up to cash balances, and you use that throughout the year to help fund operations.
Can you tell us how much we collect, all that, comes in?
2.7 million
2.6.
here in June 30th, 2023, which is your last audit report. But you probably have used up a lot of that, big majority of that, I think you probably already used up, already with the crisis you're in with your payroll. One thing I might mention on item L, on the bottom of page 6L, any staff reductions that you have and so forth, that those folks can probably draw employment, and before they start drawing it, state then makes the local government pay that. So if you have a significant reduction in staff, you're going to probably have to you're going to have some unemployment benefits, and your school board will be paying whatever those benefits are. On the next page, just skipping over a couple of these things, taking a little bit more time than I thought we would take, but we'll spend whatever time you want. But on top of the page is, we do have about $600,000, as Debbie mentioned, in CDs, that we're going back and trying to determine if there's any restrictions to that money and so forth on it. But Ms. Bridgewater helped us get that information from the banks to determine exactly how much that the school board did own, and so that's what's reflected on page 1, the $632,000 in CDs and so forth. But I just think we got a tough road to hoe here for a while. That payroll, I think, is going to continue to be an issue to try and fund that. Kind of with the $1 million in ESSER costs that was not requested. That's extremely painful, along with $250,000 on the career technical building. Then we got some staffing cuts that will have to be made without a doubt. All your COVID money or ESSER money, employees will have to be, you either got to move them over and pay them out of other funds, or you've got to let those go and so forth. And so that's going to be painful. Stipends, we've been very bountiful, particularly in 2024 and 2025. It's got to be reduced, and et cetera. So hopefully our student count won't go down any this year, but we don't know until that time rolls around, and et cetera. And I just think the bottom line is your cash flow is going to, I think, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Just kind of the way the cycle of the school board works, and the situation we're in, the cuts as for salaries, or the cuts as for stipends, that those probably will not have any impact financially until September, and because as you know, those salaries are outlined for the rest of the year, and you get paid over 12 months, even though the teachers and stuff work 10 months, that's already kind of locked in stone. And so September will be the first time that those salaries will be reduced, and 1 month of reductions won't make up for all these months we were having of pain. So it's going to take a few months for that to come back around. But I wish I had a better story to paint for you, but I'm trying to paint you the best as we can see. We've done a lot of work. I think Crystal's done a lot of work on the grants, and that's going to help you in the short term, because we're trying to get all the requisitions turned in, working with Ms. Tilley to get your cash flow in as quickly as we can. So we're kind of bunching up historically, as far as you mentioned a minute ago, these grant requests have been long and coming sometimes, and several months after the expenditure occurred, and she's trying to get those up where you're, like this past month, try to get those requisitions done shortly, within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So you're gonna get caught up on that, and so we're gonna have a sort of a bump in cash collections from that over, you know, the last month, the next 2 or 3 months and so forth, and then it'll level back out. But, we've done a lot of work on that, and, we've got your bank reconciliations up, through April, and, we can then sort of tackle, getting through May, and then looking at the books and trying to make other adjustments and so forth that need to be made, and, to get to the point where we can have good financial statements to be able to base financial decisions off of. So, keep working and try to get you fixed up as quickly as possible.
Mr. Tim Allen Green, I know we pressing y'all hard, y'all working hard, but I pray that we work harder and harder so we can make it through these next 2 to 3 months and be able to pay these employees. And that's one thing we pushing for. And I do want to thank y'all for being here, for coming and helping us, because our God and you all, and inviting you all in. We don't know what we will be. So I know y'all have done a superb job. And me, myself, as long as I'm here, I want y'all to stay here so our finances never can get this bad again. I believe that we're supposed to have auditors, business managers, tell us the good and tell us the bad. That we shouldn't have to get to a point that we are now. And I'm not blaming anybody. All I'm blaming is some people when they don't tell the truth while standing the arm. Because I know I have bills, and when you cut my check off, and I said something, and I wrote and made in 23rd board meeting. I said, it seems that some people might ignore the situation with our Malcolm Parish School employees. However, I have not forgotten what happened back in 2012, where they let go over 50 employees due to our financial struggles. I'm determined to ensure that this does not happen again under my watch. It's crucial for us to be transparent in our dealing, especially when it comes to our business. I said this to that board, this board, and I said that to Paul, that when we not telling the truth about our finances, because only somebody you can go to, I can be a superintendent, I can be a board member, president, vice president. I go to that person and ask that person at my house, make sure all my finances go to my wife. Make sure it get her account. So I'm looking for my bills and everything to be paid because she's handling. How come you see a light bill cut off? All I did, I didn't go budget the bill. I asked her and I gave her the money. So a business manager, anybody in here know that you shouldn't be afraid, because we are not, I would not, and I know this board would not, let anybody try to fire you if we know we're not sending our reimbursement fee. And they not. If you're doing an invoice and you know you get into that person to file it, and that person not doing it, you should go straight to that superintendent. Then that superintendent don't do nothing about it, then the board deal with him. But it shouldn't be where you do your invoice and your stuff be here, and it's not getting reimbursed. You know, I know we got some program that you have no problem with because they sit in for the reimbursement. Well, if my invoice is being sent to you, I can't lay my invoice and I owe somebody in November and I don't pay them till next November. This kind of stuff board that have got us in this type of trouble. And my solution now is that I just discussed, I can't look in the past. Also, I'm pressing forward to a higher cause. Whatever behind me, we need to fix it so when our time is up, we're having it, we here or not here, the next board. And I want you all to be here. until we fix this thing and after we fix it. Because I just want to give you my thanks and thank God that y'all came aboard. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Just tell you, they're working hard on it, because I get calls from them at night, and, get some emails late at night.
Text that if they may be let go and our funding get better, you can look at them to bring them back once it gets better. Oh, I'm sorry, no. I guess you ain't saying on the same accord, but I'll let Superintendent handle it, but I thank y'all.
I have a question about withdrawing off the CD. So is that something the board should have in policy, that something that large shouldn't happen without all the board knowing? Or is that considered in the day-to-day?
I think the cities are probably unusual, or infrequent. A lot of times they're set up for a year or 6 months or whatever. So I would probably think the board would kind of approve those.
If we'd have known about that, we would have said, why are we having to dip into a CD at this point? You know, and go a little deeper then, instead of, and maybe I'm the only one that missed it, that we gave permission to draw off the CD $400,000.
Well, the last board with, that was here, and they hadn't got the COVID money yet. And the board approved that they could go in the CD. The LCM made the motion. It was $3 million that they gave out. It was in Capital One, if I'm not mistaken, to pay for COVID. But see, that $3 million never was replaced back in Capital One. From Ursa to Capital One. I remember Darryl made that motion because the people was complaining about they hadn't got any COVID money. And they made the motion, and they supposed to place the $3 million back in the CD. It never was.
No, my question is, do we need to make policy to make sure that?
No, it's supposed to come to the board and handle it.
And I mean, does anyone remember it?
No, I don't remember, but it's supposed to come, any type of monetary that, remember we said the superintendent, business manager, and monetary money, that's what the board is over. When it comes down to administrator, principal, administrator, the board, the superintendent hired him. We don't have no authority under the act as a superintendent, and we never had a principal or administrator brought before us in the 2 years. They took that away from us years ago. The board could say, no, I don't want to hire that person. But the board can't do that because all that kind of things is on the superintendent. Whoever he point, they do good, hooray. They do bad, is in his evaluation. But when it comes down to that money, the state gonna hold us accountable for money that's being misappropriated and not coming to the board to get approval
We didn't know it was just inappropriate. It's never been brought to us. A lot of stuff has never been brought to us. It should have been, money-wise, financially.
they're the board in Fort Gibson. And they say it wasn't brought to us like Ms. Hargrave said and I said. The state demolished that whole board. And they said that but they didn't have on the tape that they was asking questions about the money. And I think we did ask questions to the business manager. I can read, I can understand some stuff, but some feel that that's what we hire people for, to know if they tell it from us, superintendent, president or vice president, and the board, the mayor, president of the United States, got all people that work under them. And all we can do is ask these people, and if they don't be honest with you, what can you do? But y'all is telling us. There's a song who say, once I was blind, but now I see. We was blind, but now we see a lot of stuff that wasn't Hold your head. And I hope and pray that we don't have to, with the COVID, I understand because it's in it, but I pray that we don't have to rip an employee. That I pray that we can work, and because I looked at that in 2019, we had 217 employees. And then I looked on here, and if I can find it, make sure I'm correct, because I don't want to see it wrong. Okay, in 2017, 2019, we had 187 employees. From May the 25th and 2024, we had 286 employees. And now, the latest said 281. And that's when we had the COVID, right? And now we don't have the COVID. Okay, thank you, Mr. Tim. Thank y'all, Allison. Appreciate you all. Dr. Butler, Chairman, you got to turn it over to the doctor.
Yeah, item D. Well, Rev, at this point, we're gonna keep praying, we don't have to do any rips at this point, okay? But in a week or so, our auditors will let us know more of an exact number. As you mentioned earlier, we have way more employees. We had employees that we did not let go from HESA. Okay, they were basically moved over under Title I funds and so forth. So those employees already know that they were working under HESA. Okay, we'll send out another letter to all those employees, letting them know that at the end of August, when they're, that's when they receive their last check. But again, we carried them over a whole extra year, so they should have been released, at the end of last year, okay? And those were just federal funded employees. So as of right now, we don't have the data to say that we're gonna rip until they look into the numbers. We're only retaining enough employees to make sure that we can run a school district. All right? And that's where we are right now. Okay? So and then the firm did say, in order for us not to get in this position again, they're gonna help develop some procedures so that we can be on point with making sure that we do our reimbursements. Because like you mentioned earlier, the reimbursements really what got us in a crunch. And last, I thought, maybe clarified, I thought December 16th was the last day that we could give ESSER funds to services and employees, right?
That was for the final request.
Yeah, final request for everything, okay? So at that time, we shouldn't have had any money going out under ESSER.
And it should have been obligated by
Should have already been obligated by
September
September 30th.
30th.
That's it. So there's no rip at this point, but we'll see in the next week or so what we come up with. All right? Yes.
Should the students of the district expect any major changes in August?
No, it shouldn't be any major changes in August. We should still be able to fill all of our teachers' slots. Is basically the extra. We had ESSER, we had fluff, we had paras in every classroom for one. We had extra COVID custodians. And all this was in our code, in our ESSER protocols that we could use. Those are the positions that should have been gone, almost a year now. But no changes in the services that we will be able to provide our students.
Thank you.
What is your update on what is your update on your moving process, consolidation, with the vehicles, how we moving, or how we gonna do it, what's your update?
Well, talking to Miss Georgette, she recommended, renting out some trailers to help speed the move up. I was under the impression that it's still going along as we go, so we'll definitely have to catch up with moving. I don't see it being a problem with, at Wright, but we wanna make sure that Wright is situated first, because they're receiving the students. And then, all the equipment from Wright, from our central office, not our central office, from Title I, with the personnel that's over at Title I, they would have to move over to Little Elementary. That can.
What is, can the people that's there now, that, people that write, that's gonna be going over to elementary, can they be in the process of moving?
But yeah, they should already have their stuff packed up. That was already, been given out. So they should have their, things already moved. Georgette is not here yet, but we do have a plan that Ms. Lovely has.